Sup y'all, it's me, it's your boy, Beige Thinny Freak Tano. Today I've got something a little bit different than my usual fare. I've been trying to work on this video for a little while now, but it didn't really come together the way I wanted it to. I started out trying to make a video about the shenanigans surrounding the untimely end of the Opie and Anthony subreddits, but my typical style didn't really lend itself very well to this video. My plan was to make something similar to, The Deep End or my other documentaries, but kind of shorter. The problem was most of the evidence has been destroyed, and my style really leans heavily on having a lot of evidence to back everything up. But I'm still kind of in the weeds with my next documentary, so while I'm working on that, I figured I would just put something out. And in this case, I'm gonna just talk about the events that happened from memory, and therefore this will be kind of more like a podcast or a story time, whatever you want to call it, where I am just rambling to you and telling you my recollection of the events that happened over the last couple months, but more broadly, since late last year. If there's something that I think is particularly important, I will put it up in the video so you guys can read that. But for the most part, just think of this as like something you can just sort of sit back and listen to for however long it takes me to rattle off this ridiculous tale. Before I get into everything, I want to say two things. One, if you like my videos, please subscribe and also click the bell for notifications. It is the most cringy, cliche YouTube thing to say, but the simple fact of the matter is, YouTube no longer really cares about showing you videos from channels that you are subscribed to. And recently I have gotten lots of comments and messages from people who say they thought that I quit making videos because they're just not seeing them. So it is important to hit the bell to get notifications. The next thing I want to say is, if you would like to support my channel, please check out my Patreon. The way things are going lately, with pretty much everything being demonetized, sometimes just for swearing, and, especially with these weird, inconsistent, draconian hate speech rules are coming up with now, it's becoming harder and harder just to make a little bit of money as, a hobby. The fact of the matter is, for one of my videos, the bare minimum, it might be 100 hours of work. And I put up with it because I really do enjoy making these videos. But at the end of the day, it's a real bummer to put a lot of work into something and then be immediately demonetized. So all I can really do is just to say to you guys, if you like what I do, you can go give me $1. It will definitely help me in the long term with trying to make videos that you guys will like. And that's really about all I have to say on that particular note. So, with the e-begging out of the way, let's just jump into it. So where to begin? I think the entire story starts either September or October last year, if I remember correctly. Around that time, two things were happening. The first was that the Opie and Anthony subreddit was in a drought. At this point in time, Anthony had been banned from Twitter. Opie was doing really nothing interesting. Brother Joe had his Twitter in protected mode, and really nothing particularly interesting was happening. So the subreddit was kind of looking for a new public enemy. Now at the same time this was happening, Norm Macdonald was being publicly lashed for being a comedian while white, I guess. I don't know what exactly caused people to go after him, but nevertheless, he was being attacked from all sides, and one of the people who attacked him was a fat, slovenly, failed sci-fi writer named Patrick S. Tomlinson, who LARPs as a stand-up comedian and occasionally some kind of political firebrand. If memory serves me right, at this point, Patrick had, I think, 2 viral tweets. One regarding abortion, and another one, which is I think the one that kind of made him really Twitter famous and got him tens of thousands of Twitter followers, which was the one where he talks about how the generation of children have been raised on the Hunger Games movies and their future prospects are incredibly bleak, and how they're basically going to come after the Republicans or whatever. And he says, "Get them, children, leave none standing." I'm paraphrasing, but it was actually much more embarrassing. So, Patrick, not wanting to be left out of the dogpile on Norm Macdonald, makes a tweet where he says that he and his comedian friends never found Norm Macdonald particularly funny. I'm pretty sure that was literally all it took for the Opie and Anthony subreddit to start going after him. And because they had just got a really nice workout going after Anthony and getting him banned from Twitter 4 times, I think, they used the same tactics against Patrick, and they dug up the old tweets where he was advocating for violence against women, conservative women I should say, talking about punching women in MAGA hats and telling Donald Trump he should stick a pineapple up his ass, I think, something really dumb like that. But it was enough for Twitter to ban Patrick. One of the reasons why I find this kind of interesting was, just before Patrick had been banned from Twitter, I said something to him, I don't remember what it was, but immediately afterwards he had blocked me, and also he dug through my tweets and found something where I made a joke about suicide, and then reported me, and I got a temporary suspension. So for me, this kind of sticks out in particular. Anyway, after the first account went down, he made another account. That one was shortly afterwards taken down for ban evasion. And then he made another account, which was Robert S. Mueller, and it was his cat. So he ended up LARPing as his cat on Twitter, giving all his hot political takes about Trump, or excuse me, as he would say, Flonald Plump. But even that account went down too. I mean, shit, Anthony didn't get the Bad Beavis account taken down. You gotta be really trying hard to get your cat LARPing account banned too, so that's pretty exceptional to me. However, getting Patrick's Twitter accounts banned wasn't the end of it. While that was going on, people also realized that Patrick had been making posts to a subreddit called r stand-up shots, which it's a really embarrassing subreddit, but basically what happens is comedians post a picture of themselves doing stand-up with one of their jokes as a text caption next to themselves doing stand-up. And it really is as bad as it sounds. But with Patrick, it was like especially embarrassing because his jokes are just terrible. So what the Opie and Anthony subreddit did was they would take the picture of Patrick doing stand-up, and instead of one of Patrick's jokes, it will be something like really racist, really sexist, or just like blatant, like the 14 words. And this process went on for months, all the while Patrick was crying on his blog about online terrorism and cyberbullying and the alt-right. And if Patrick had stuck to doing this, I don't think we'd really be having this conversation. What really fucked him was the fact that he had to respond. He had to feed the trolls, because Patrick is, even more so than someone like Joe Cumia, he is a dumb person who thinks he's really smart. And so he had to engage with the trolls. Anytime one of his pictures was posted on our stand-up shots, he would have to come into the thread and let everyone know that he is not in fact a white supremacist. He would engage with trolls specifically one-on-one, and people picked up on certain vernacular he used, like the fact that he really enjoyed using child, little one, sweetie pie, honey bun, those kind of things as insults. And for a writer, he has a surprisingly small vocabulary and doesn't really know a variety of ways to insult someone. But the fact that Patrick would talk to trolls directly and was making social media posts about them and about the group of alt-right internet terrorists that were following him around and attacking him, it created this cycle where things just kept escalating and the stakes kept getting higher and higher. And so you have the Opie and Anthony subreddit digging into Pat's personal life the fact that his wife left him for another man, that he lost custody of his child and has, as far as I know, no visitation rights with her. And you even have people digging into claims that Patrick made about defending marginalized people at Worldcon's science fiction convention against Nazis screaming blood and soil. But in reality, it turned out that Patrick was actually counter-protesting a conservative group that was protesting, let's call it intergenerational love in science fiction. And it turns out that this is actually a pretty big problem with several famous sci-fi writers like Marion Zimmer Bradley being called a pedophile and child molester by her own daughter, Moira Grayland. And this is something that Patrick's good friend, Kat Rambo, another sci-fi author, is well aware of, because as president of the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America, she did not denounce Bradley for the acts of child molestation. This is a rabbit hole that's a bit too deep to get into in this video, but it just goes to show the kind of things that the Opie and Anthony subreddit were digging up to find dirt on Patrick. And as time went by, almost the entirety of the subreddit was consumed with posts attacking Patrick, mocking him, mocking his social media posts, to the point that codependent Joe Kumia was actually having a shit fit on the subreddit because he wasn't getting enough attention, and he ended up posting a bunch of AMAs and divulging a bunch of information, like the fact that he called his mother with dementia an orange. But even Joe Kumia, going all out, being as stupid as he could be, he still wasn't able to distract people from Patrick. But things took a bit of a weird turn in, I believe it was April of this year, when the head mod of our Opie and Anthony, a guy named Space Edge, suddenly made a post telling people to stop making threads about Patrick, or else they would be banned. His justification for this was he didn't know who Patrick was, even though people had been making threads about him for at least like 8 months. And he didn't think they should be making threads about a guy who wasn't connected to the Opie and Anthony universe at all, even though the Opie and Anthony subreddit had been trashing all kinds of people not connected to Opie and Anthony. What happened next was pretty chaotic. A lot of people weren't happy with what Space Edge was doing. They saw it as like dictatorial and egomaniacal and a whole bunch of other adjectives. So they immediately splintered off and made our Opie and Anthony. And within the next couple days, pretty much all of the active users had migrated from our Opie and Anthony to our Opie and Anthony. There were something like 5,000 subs within the first 2 or 3 days, and frequently at least 500 active users, if I remember correctly, which pretty much rivaled what the Opie and Anthony sub was doing at prime time. Maybe it was a couple, 150 less, but split across 2 subs at this point, and the other sub was a ghost town in comparison. This turned out to be a pretty smart move, because shortly after the thread that Space Edge posted, he went mental. He demodded everyone but himself, and then he turned the Opie and Anthony subreddit private. While this was going on, Joe Kumia doxed him, and people found some CCTV footage of Space Edge stealing a vape from a vape store. That's really the Cliff Notes version of what happened, because it was a lot more autistic in real time. Despite losing the original subreddit, nothing really changed. Everybody that would post regularly was now on our Opie and Anthony, and the moderators who made that subreddit had basically said that it was for Opie, Anthony, Pat, whatever. But it was a bit rocky. At first, there were issues with people using Space Edge's real name, as well as Patrick and some of his associates in the writing world, and they ended up filing a lot of privacy complaints, doxing complaints, whatever you want to call them, which kind of got the admins involved in the situation. But eventually people stopped doing that for the most part, except for one guy who ended up getting banned on like 6 accounts. His name was Crooked Smile, I think, and he had like a vendetta with the mods. But that's sort of a, I don't know, that's like your 8th degree side story of the whole Reddit conundrum. Things were okay for a while, but things started getting a little bit more rough when Patrick started filing DMCA claims on any thread or post using material from his social media, which was a lot of posts, because people would just be screenshotting his Instagram or his Facebook or whatever it may be and posting it to Reddit. So there were dozens, maybe hundreds of posts that were being flagged for DMCA claims. This led the subreddit moderators to turn off any image posting for a brief period of time, and eventually, for the most part, people stopped posting anything from Patrick's social media. Some people were even drawing these ridiculous mock-ups of his social media posts. So it would be like Patrick's Instagram where he's talking about running a 5K, but somebody would literally just draw the Instagram page and post that instead. And there were a couple people who were putting out really great original artwork. And I gotta give a shout out to Chance Arm here because he was the champion. He posted some of the funniest things that I think have ever been posted in the history of Opie and Anthony Reddit. But despite a concerted effort not to post anything that Patrick could DMCA, some people were still posting his social media posts, were also cross-posting to other websites where they had posted something of Patrick's, which inevitably led the mods back to our Opie and Anthony, and there is at least some reason to believe that Patrick himself may have been running a false flag operation where he would post his social media posts on an alternate account and then report them to get the subreddit in more hot water. A long story short is, unfortunately, our Opie and Anthony was taken down under the weight of countless copyright claims and was eventually banned only, I think, 6 weeks after its creation. So this was something that I forgot while I was doing the initial recording, but I thought it was interesting enough to mention. Around the later part of the Opie and Anthony subreddit saga, people started to mess around with the reviews on Patrick's books, and they noticed a couple of interesting things. One was the fact that Patrick's latest book, Starship Repo, which came out May 21st of 2019, shared the name with another series written by a gentleman named Will Tate. But more than that, while people were harassing Patrick and he was freaking out about people negatively review bombing his books, they noticed that he had been giving himself 5-star reviews on Goodreads, and he was so panicked and paranoid about Opie and Anthony subreddit leaving negative reviews for his book that he was openly arguing with random people who gave his book a negative review. He was accusing them of being trolls and basically went full Empress Teresa. It wasn't really the biggest thing, but it just goes to show how deranged Patrick is. Now, here's where things get kind of interesting, because the majority of the people who are posting on our Opie and Anthony instinctively fell back to our Scorch, which had long been declared the bunker should the subreddit ever get banned. And from here, people split off into 3 groups, the first of which wanted to find an alternative to Reddit, but we'll talk about them later. The second decided to stay on our Scorch, whereas the third made a new subreddit, our Opie and Anthony XYZ, because they believed our Scorch should only serve as a fallback point, so that if a subreddit got banned, people could come back to our Scorch, regroup, and move on to the next subreddit. Shortly after the inception of our Opie and Anthony XYZ, the subreddit was put into private mode. This was done in the hopes that they could prevent someone like Patrick S. Tomlinson or Joe Kumia or another enemy of the sub from coming in and filing DMCAs on posts. But ultimately, it was pointless, because both our Scorch and our Opie and Anthony XYZ were banned for ban evasion. There were a few pretty interesting moments in the waning days of our Scorch and our Opie and Anthony XYZ. Probably the most notable was when people challenged Joe Kumia about his association with convicted child rapist Jeff Hollander, aka Kurt Love, who Danny had accused of spending time at Anthony's house for parties, as well as driving underage girls to his house, and even molesting them in Anthony's presence. Joe denied this, but shortly afterward, somebody posted a thread that compared a social media post of Joe Cumia's with a screen cap from a video where Jeff Hollander shot a video with Daniel Bobo Curlin, and it appears to be in the same house. It's probably only coincidence that Joe Cumia made his Twitter account protected again, but I can't really speculate too much on that topic. Either way, the subreddits had been taken down once again. A few people have tried to make new subreddits. There was r/Scorched2, which just recently got banned, and for the moment, our Opie and Anthony XYZ is holding out, but for who knows how long. And at this point, we head into the most uncertain phase of the Opie and Anthony Reddit community. A few people are branching out into new subs, but with no real central leadership, it seems like each subreddit captures a smaller and smaller portion of the previous user base. We also have the return of some subreddit villains, because after our Opie and Anthony went down, brave boy Tony Coombs decided to make his return to Twitter. And if you want to understand how far he has fallen, his latest account has been dubbed a parody account. He will still probably be banned again, either for ban evasion when people realize the parody account moniker is complete bullshit, or when he gets really drunk and just says something racist or transphobic, most likely. Where he'll go from there, I don't really know. Maybe he'll make another Twitter account because he's clearly addicted to it, but your guess is as good as mine. What I find really interesting is the upcoming fate of the people who have really attached themselves to the Opie and Anthony Reddit community. Because I mentioned earlier, there was a group of people who wanted to split away from Reddit entirely, and they have done that. It may seem like a strange choice to go back to an old school message board, but some people have done that with the newly minted opieandanthony.com. And I think this might be the most interesting development that we've seen so far. Because in my opinion, Anthony, Joe, Patrick, and everyone else, they were so concerned with shutting down the Opie and Anthony subreddit that they didn't really pause to consider the consequences of doing so. Because whenever people were on Reddit, there was always that looming threat of being banned, of having the subreddit shut down. But now that people are off of Reddit, they're on their own site, they can do just about whatever they want as long as it's within legal reason. By getting the Opie and Anthony community kicked off Reddit, effectively all that people like Joe, Pat, whoever have accomplished is to concentrate the most obsessed, diehard, hate-fueled people into one place, where they don't have to obey the rules of Reddit. They can do whatever they want, they can say whatever they want, and they can plan whatever they want. And maybe you could say this opens them up for more direct legal consequences. I have a hard time believing that an overweight sci-fi writer from Milwaukee will be able to accomplish much in court against a bunch of impoverished truckers who barely have enough money to afford lentil soup. Where all of this goes, long term, I don't know. I don't think any of us know. I think short term there will be a lot of fireworks. I think we're in for a really fun time in the next couple weeks to months. But after that, it's kind of up in the air. The only thing I do know for certain is that in one incarnation or another, there will always be at least a couple hundred, if not thousand people who have rage in their hearts and a desire to bring pain and sadness upon others. And I thank them for their service. As always, I want to thank you guys for watching the video, as well as liking, commenting, and subscribing. And I want to give a special shout out to my supporters on Patreon. So thank you. Kevin Howard, Danny, Thomas Strahi, Jackie, Jack, Bone CK, Wrestling Soup, and James Taylor.